Good afternoon, everybody. Attorney General Martha Coakley. With me to my right is Detective Lieutenant Dennis Brooks of the Massachusetts State Police, and to my left is Special Assistant Attorney General Paul Ware, who, as you know, is working with our office on this investigation into the tunnel collapse, and particularly around the circumstances surrounding July 10th, 2006, and the death of Milena Del Valle. As a result of a comprehensive and an ongoing criminal probe into criminal conduct connected with the tunnel ceiling collapse, a Suffolk Grand Jury today returned one indictment of manslaughter against Power Fasteners, Inc. For the death of Milena Del Valle in that incident on July 10th of last year. Powers Fasteners, Inc. is a Brewster, New York-based company that marketed and distributed the epoxy that was used in the tunnel, and particularly in this application for maintaining the ceiling, and provided the epoxy anchor bolt system to the various parties involved with the design and construction of this tunnel. It was used, as you know, to suspend the ceiling panels, and particularly in the time, the allegation is that the epoxy was used to suspend the ceiling panels that collapsed on the car that included Milena Del Valle and her husband, Angel Del Valle. What I want to just show you briefly so you get an understanding of what we're talking about is that an artist drawing shows the design of this ceiling. There is an anchor bolt that is suspended in here with a T-piece. This is put into the concrete and is secured with epoxy. And we're going to talk about the difference between two products that Powers made, something called standard set and something called fast set. But this is how it should work, with an anchor bolt and a plate here that is flush with the ceiling of the tunnel. What you see in the second picture below is the ceiling here and the anchor bolt that is slipped, what we call in this investigation, what the industry calls creep. That is the slow slippage, and you can see the red portion here that indicates that is clearly not appropriate. It's come below where it should be. And as that creep process progressed, the anchor bolts moved, and the ceiling and the roof here, and then the ceiling that is suspended just begins to slowly slip. What you see here below is the result of that creep. That is the allegations today that the product used, the Powers Fast set, which we allege was not the appropriate product to use for this kind of application, was as a direct result of behavior by Powers that I'm going to ask Special Assistant Attorney Paul Ware to talk about briefly in a minute. But this shows how it should work, what in fact happened with the creep, and the result of the creep was the ceiling collapse on the car that evening on July 10th on Milena Del Valle, which caused her death, we allege, and that is the reason that the grand jury, we have asked to return the indictments today.
Thank you, Attorney General. Central to the evidence that's been presented to the grand jury and that we've seen outside the grand jury is the fact that Powers made two separate products, as the Attorney General has suggested. One a fast set product, the other a standard set product. The evidence in this case has demonstrated and will demonstrate that Powers knew, obviously, of the distinction between those two products. And as early as 1991 and continuing through the mid-90s, up through even 2006, was periodically doing testing on these products to determine the extent to which the fast set product was suitable for a sustained load. Sustained load simply meaning something like the tunnel ceiling. It had an ongoing load over a long period of time. Those tests unequivocally, unambiguously revealed that the fast set product was unsuitable, was not appropriate for a sustained load, including a tunnel ceiling. Throughout the 90s, that evidence was available to Powers. They indeed sponsored the testing from which those results were obtained. And yet on this project, they failed to make that distinction clear to anyone on the project, including many of the professionals. So at the end of the day, the FastSet product having been used, Powers simply remained silent with respect to its characteristics in such a way that ultimately resulted in this tragedy. Powers, as the Attorney General suggested, is a New York company. They are a substantial company, and as the Attorney General suggested, the investigation is ongoing with respect to other possible defendants, and we're not here to comment on the extent to which there will or will not be further indictments. But this indictment, we believe, gets to the heart of the matter, particularly since the evidence will include information that in 1999, when there was demonstrable displacement or so-called creep in these anchor bolts, and Powers was called to the tunnel, reviewed the anchor bolts comparable to what you see in these photographs here, in which there's displacement between the ceiling and the anchor bolt, which simply should not occur. They had the opportunity to make clear the distinction in these products and to raise the red flag at that time, which might have altered the course of events. They did not do so, and accordingly, we stand before you today with this indictment. This is an example of the product. It's comparable to the product as actually installed. And what this really is a two-part product, a resin on one side and a hardener on the other side, not terribly different from a weekend kind of glue that you might be using at home, where there's a nozzle that mixes the two components, causing the glue to actually harden, the epoxy in this case, to mix with the resin and hardener, to mix the resin and the hardener and result in a sustainable product. So this is roughly what we're talking about in this case, and this is a Powers product.
What I want to do is stress that this is one piece now of an ongoing investigation, and no inferences should be drawn from this indictment today about lack thereof or the decisions that have been or will be reached as to any other parties involved. I want to stress again that the investigations around this on the federal level, on the state level, criminal, civil, relating to cost recovery, relating to compensation, relating to other asset features that we are looking at, remains open and ongoing. And I particularly today need to thank a few people who have been instrumental in this. First of all, my predecessor, Tom Riley, and the team that he put together immediately after this tunnel collapse. Those individuals at the Attorney General's office and many of our companion agencies on the state level have been working literally in many weeks and many times around the clock, and continue to work diligently to get the best results we can for the Commonwealth. I have to thank the U.S. Attorney and the staff at the U.S. Attorney's Office for their collaboration in what continues to be a compelling investigation. And I think many of you know that as we reach results, we are trying to be transparent about them. We were at the federal court when we announced a plea agreement with Aggregate Industries. This office last May reached a settlement with AIG Insurance for $58.5 million. And so as we look at both culpability on the criminal side and liability on the civil side, you might imagine that many of the issues overlap. We are trying our best to be complete, to be fair, both to the Commonwealth, and we are mindful, of course, of the family of Milena Del Valle and their lawsuits, which are pending in parallel state court here. And so I will say that these issues are ongoing, they are complex, and I will be very frank with you and say I do not believe there is a perfect solution to any of these issues that we face, but we do believe that we need a resolution, and you have our commitment, and I believe that of our federal counterparts, that we will reach the best solution that we can under the circumstances. And as we do that, we will announce those results in these ongoing investigations. We will take questions now and answer the ones that we can.